All right, so looking at, let's see, we did, okay, so there it is, P1-3. Always look at those and I want to see the one below it. So there's a couple ways that we can approach this. And let's see, 1/2 inch, 2.5, 3.5. All right, oh, get back to my drawing, and that was in inches. So File, New, pick up a part, and I'm going to right-click on the front plane to get into the sketch. Said that it was inches. Let's go ahead with drawing the sketch, and just looking at that, doing the click drag or the click click. So here the advantage of the click click is that it is a continuous line, or it's going to stay in the line command. It's just a matter of whatever habit you adopt. I think there's enough advantages for me speed-wise to stay with the click drag that I will probably not be a click clicker. Anyway, the one line that didn't get a relation, and I can tell because it was off just a little bit and it moves, I will highlight and tell it to either go vertical or come over to the left and tell it to go vertical. So we had a 1/2 inch. And the nice thing is that this will scale. So that was about 1 inch on the dimension. It will kind of self-scale the rest of the drawing. If this was 1 inch and I made it a 10-inch dimension, I wouldn't have to chase all of the rest of the geometry inverting down to nothing while this one line went, monstrously out into space. Okay, so then we'll come back over, and I think that was 3.5. I'll have to switch. All right, so the 3.5, the 2.5, that makes sense, and then 2.5 tall. So it did kind of push it over a little bit, but not too bad. And notice that I'm picking objects. I'm picking the lines, kind of staying in that just single entity selection. And we had not ready for the holes, so 2 inches and 1.5 for the angle. Okay, so I have geometry. If I decided that I needed this in metric, all right, and this is still one of the ones that comes around pretty often, so I'll revisit it. If I'm in the sketch, I go to millimeters, grams, and seconds, it will change to millimeters, grams, and seconds. It also kicks me out of the sketch. To get back into the sketch, I'm going to right-click and edit sketch. I'm going to right-click on one of the object lines and edit sketch. Or I'm going to go back to the sketch command manager item, hit sketch, and if I pick that entity, that lets me back in. If I have one pre-selected, say I have one pre-selected and I hit sketch, that will let me back in. So, again, 3 or 4 ways. One of those is going to make sense to you. One of you're going to be comfortable with. I've kind of adopted I know which sketch I want. I see it in the highlight. That's the one I'm going to open. And I go right back to it. And then we're in the millimeters, grams, and seconds. All of my dimensions updated. I'm going to switch back over to inch, pounds, and seconds. It kicks me out again. And then I can double click if I want to just see the dimensions. All right, so one of the reasons why you don't need to put dimensions on the solid is because that double click pulls them into view, and then as soon as I click out, they're gone again. So it's a quick, easy way of showing I can verify, this needed to be 2 inches for whatever reason. I changed the dimension, I need to rebuild. Right? Once I rebuild, then the sketch will catch up. If I don't rebuild, then it will wait until the next natural rebuild or the next feature, and then it will do it. We mentioned the parameters, and so this is not really a parameter type thing. So drawing the sketch, drawing the lines, objects, when you go to that dimension, there's a primary value to that dimension. And there's a dimension name. So basically, this is the address. and then this is the dimension. That is the same. Oh, I did it again. Oh, you click on that one. When I highlight the dimension, that is the address, and that is the actual dimension. All right, so in that case, there are going to be times where maybe this is a little bit cluttered, or I would like to see the more information. Then I can come over to its primary value and update this number and make the adjustment. And then be careful of the reverse direction, because wherever you see a reverse direction, it just went to a negative value. That one's not going to a negative value, so it's probably not going to follow it. So I don't know what I'm going to get, but we'll rebuild. We got exactly what I told it to do. All right, so that was the operator request. So going back into that, double click. I'm sorry, double click. And then that reverse direction over here is doing the same thing as the reverse the sense of the dimension. So maybe not the same terminology, same symbol, but same net effect. I can rebuild it out of the dimension and then OK it. All right, so again, a lot of things going on in the background, little kind of nuisances that will nip at your heels and make you frustrated. One of the more common ones, and I will have to turn this off, is under the Customize, there is this Lock Command Manager and Toolbars. Notice that when I do that, my tabs go all the way out because I have a bunch of add-ins that use a lot of tabs. So I'm not concerned about them, so I'm going to hit OK. And watch what happens. Let's see, where do I get that? Make sure I did it. Yeah, Lock Command Manager. By the tabs to undock it. Oh, there we go. When this happens to you, not if it happens to you, when this happens to you. I don't think the Lock Command Manager is on by default. In 2016 it wasn't, but they added it in 2016, and that became my instant favorite tool. So my instant favorite tool prevents this from getting thrown off into space. Now the advantage of the Command Manager and the task pane is that if I have dual monitors, I can relocate these to dual monitors onto the second monitor. So that part of it's kind of cool, but most of the time it's just a nuisance. So I grab the Command Manager. You have 1, 2, 3 docking locations. If I go back to that docking location, it will go right back where it started, and it is just I was picking on something and I held on to it a little too long while I drug, and now it's out into space. You know, and I moved the mouse at the wrong time with the right click, or with the left click in this case, and it was out of its location. So we go into Customize, and we will lock the Command Manager and Toolbars, and now it is, you can try, but it's not going anywhere. So that would be one to recommend that you do turn that one on. Larger buttons with text was what I had on, mainly because of the selections and going through the screen. But all of these have tooltips. If you are comfortable with the smaller icons and knowing about where things are and can navigate to them and use the tooltips to recognize them, that buys you a lot of screen space. But I'll leave those on for the lectures and for the use. And then if you want the old style toolbars, we can turn the Command Manager off altogether. We'll have the features bar, the sketch bar, just the standard toolbars. Kind of reverts back to when I first started, a long time ago. All right, so I like the Command Manager. It's a decent interface, but there are reasons why you may want the toolbar, so be aware that you can do that. All right, so let's go ahead and finish this out so we can do a few more things. I gave a thickness of 0.75. So right now I'm outside of the sketch. If I was in the sketch and editing the sketch, I could go right to features and tell it to extrude boss base. My other options are to highlight the sketch as out of the feature tree, or again highlight one of the entities and go into the extrude base. boss base so that it will go into the property manager for the feature. Goes to 0.75. I have a feature. Now, I think by default the shadows and the shading are on, and that is under the view, which is kind of a little TV set. And most of the time, if you are supporting real view graphics, turn that off. Shadows and shaded mode. Okay, I think I made it mad. And ambient occlusion. Probably the most annoying one, if you are used to working in a 2D mechanical and are expecting 2D mechanical. Let's go ahead and put the holes in. I'll double check here real quick. 1 inch, 1 inch, 125, ½ inch. And I'm going to stay with just the standard holes. Okay, I'm adding the dimensions first so we can get those in. And again, going to the perimeter or the circumference, however you want to think about it. 0.25, so missed there. So now I go back and I do the select, control, select. And again, that's another one of those my fingers are already doing it as my mouth is catching up. So the process is to select the center point, hold down the control button, select the center point, tell it that it's horizontal. Select the object, select the circle in this case, hold down the control button, make the selection. These are going to be equal. And then I chose to do this as 2 features because there are times where you will want this to be geometry that does not include the holes. We do not want a nested. And depending on the complexity, I think I saw a comment that having this separate feature takes less resources to resolve than going through and resolving the sketch and opening up those nested items. So for the feature then, instead of the boss base, I now have access to an extrude cut. I have something to cut. I have a solid body that will that I can remove material for. So the extruded cut. I don't want to think about this being 0.75. What happens when I tell it it's 1 inch? What happens when I tell it it's 5 inches? I want an in condition that says either through all or up to next. Through all says that if there were 10 of these stacked up, it would go find the very last one. Up to next says just go to the next surface and we'll stop there. So most of the time through all is going to be okay unless you notice that it went through or intersected additional geometry. So I have the holes. So this is a good example of what happens with perspective. And just as we'd kind of expected to see, we'd be able to see that this is more conical. It has some, well, actually it looks like it's wrapping pretty good now too, but let's go back to the control 1, and I will switch it over to the wireframe. All right, so my holes look a little bit offset, and I think that's just from the view. So as I move it across the screen, oh, that is new. It used to be that it would just show it as kind of a circle within a circle. So at least the offset, you have the perception that as it moves across the screen, that perspective, the vanishing point, that the hole behind it is moving in relation to it. So maybe that's a little bit better. I still probably won't use it on a regular basis. So we turn off the perspective and keeping it simple, keeping it to the base elements. I'm going to say that's your best bet at this point. Same with the screen backgrounds. If you prefer a kind of gray, let's see, the courtyard. Some of these get a little wild. Urban, I don't recognize that one. Rooftops, not too bad. And the soft spotlight, kind of a gray, puts it in a dimension. They're all there. They're in the first lecture we touched on the scenes, and anything that's available as a scene is available to be your default, set as default scene, and then it will be in that list as a default. Also, you are going to be able to manage favorites and maybe I don't like the courtyard in the urban, but I do like the what was that? The studio room, backdrop studio room was, and the softbox, and okay, we'll go with Dusty Antique. I can change those around and I can customize that to include those because I might use them more than once a year. Oh, wrong one. We'll go back to my default and be able to go on into to customizing a little bit. So my heads-up display will naturally look a lot different than yours because I added a bunch of stuff to it. So we've already did the where did that go? Oh, the shaded sketch contours under the sketch. I typed in a search command, I went to find it, and I drug it into my command manager, and I was able to place it. There is also under the customize the ability to select the toolbars, which was the same as right-clicking, turning things on and off. So I can right-click over here, and there's the big long list of toolbars that I might want to see, not want to see. And let's see. So we had that. Yeah, let's just go back into the customize. The shortcut bars, right? So things that have flyouts, and then also the S key. So I said I was going to come back to the S key. This is kind of my reminder to come back to the S key. All of the commands inside of SOLIDWORKS are in here somewhere. Finding them is somewhat a trick, which is why searching the commands is probably better if you know specifically what you're looking for. But in the case of the heads-up display, maybe I want to add something from the sketch that I use often. So split entities is one of those items that I use pretty regularly. As opposed to trimming, I will split entities and leave them in place, turn them into construction lines, and it is an effective strategy. To a certain extent, I don't know that I've trimmed anything in a couple of years now. So if I don't want the split entities, I grab it and I drag it back to the window. I decide I want the split entities, we grab it, we drag it to its position, and it places it. Mirror entities, midpoints, seeing if there's anything else in here that I might want. Pictures, if we were doing a lot of background. No, that's pretty good. So if you can find it in here, you can drag it out, or you can type it into the commands and drag it out to some location so that you can get to it. The menus are the kind of the pull-down menus. The keyboard, the quick reference. This is kind of the everything reference. So as we go down through here, if I wanted to change, I could take I could take and put in a hotkey for some command once I find it, and if that command is already in place, then it would warn me that, hey, you're going to kick this other one out and you're going to replace it with this one. All right, so I try not to mess with those too much. There's times where in certain versions I've really tried to go through and customize, and then I kind of forgot what I did and didn't end up using it that much anyway. So the mouse gestures, you have 4 gestures or 8 gestures. A gesture is, let's see, the right mouse button and the donut pops up. So I want to go to the front view, and this is specific to the area that you're in or to the command. So that's one that I haven't ever adopted. You'll very rarely see me use it other than to say that it's there. And if it's something that you're comfortable with, then you can go through and set your gestures. And then these are the listings and where they will be in effect. And then the customization, after I get everything all messed up, then I can go back and say restore to defaults and reset the defaults to get back to a starting point and go again. But where's the fun in that? All right. So the main one here was the Command Manager Show Tooltips. This particular graphics card, if I was to put this at full resolution, the very largest icons would still be dots. All right. So adjusting the default resolution, getting the icons to a certain size, being able to manipulate the text. That is a graphics card, things that you're going to have to play with in the background if it is a high resolution item. Let's see what context, toolbar settings, show on selection, quick configurations, quick mates, shortcut menu. And then the same thing, enable command manager, use large buttons with text. All right, so that S key then, let's get into that. S key is that I am in the feature. And one of the things that I will add regularly to this, so since it's not, oh, there it is. Never mind. I was going to say the whole wizard isn't, I don't think the whole wizard is typically in there. But if I tell it to customize this, it will show me the list. And then this is the part shortcut. So things that I would add in here, maybe we could go for the, no, that one was already there. Flyout toolbars and buttons. That would still be more of a sketch. Let's go to the standard views. There we go. Maybe I'd want to see the shaded view in here as well. So I don't like its position. We'll change position. And then when I come back over and hit the S key, now I have the ability to shade from wireframe at that location. So not the best example, but kind of a quick example for customizing. If you find that you're doing the same types of things, that it would be an advantage to have it always displayed on the heads up, throw it in there and customize it. Hit the S key and see what kind of things would be in there that you would use. Okay, so this was, let's go ahead and do a file save as. And we should be to part 1-3 and save it. All right, so again, just to kind of review, Control 1 was the front plane, Control 2 the back, Control 3 left, Control 4 right, right, Control 5 top, Control 6 is the bottom, Control 7 is the isometric, and if you select something, all right, so especially like this angled face, Control 8 is normal to that face into that position. So if I wanted to put geometry, I would select the angled face, go Control 8, get it into that orientation, and then start my sketch. For the icon, then Control normal to Control 8 is over here in the lower right. So you have access to those as well. That is pretty much the same as clicking on the icons. I didn't know it was showing the dimensions when you did that. When you click on the reference triad. Okay, I don't click on the reference triad enough, apparently. All right, so it's telling me what the plane is as I'm clicking through it and showing me those items. So again, another level of visual clues that you're going to have to pay some conscious attention to initially, but then you'll be able to just kind of know what's going on in the background and react to it as it's occurring. All right, let's see, we had those. We did the solid bodies. I mentioned the solid bodies, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the options. And I'm not ready to go through the options, but a couple of places to just point out. Under the sketch, auto rotate view normal to sketch plane on sketch relation. If you turn that off, no rotation. You pick the face, you're still in isometric, you're responsible for hitting the Control 8 normal to. Do not use fully defined sketches. Leave that one off, please. Let's see on the display. No. File locations we'll get into. So there are plenty of things that we can change. I jumped over it, but basically these are the increments. So if you want to change your rotation in increments, length, angle. Oh, nope, I got the wrong one. Let's go back to Feature Manager then. Under Feature Manager, there are my solid bodies. I have set them to show. If it is set to automatic, only when you get to that second body will it turn on the solid bodies folder and show it. There is enough functionality in solid bodies that I would like to have that on, and some things that we can do with solid bodies in the background that it's nice to know that, yes, there is only one, and I can name it, identify it, do some different things with it. And then everything else is kind of left at default unless we're using it. But as an example, let's just go to the sensor, and well, set it to automatic, but which basically will hide it, because you have to set the sensor inside of the sensor command for the sensor to be active and then for the folder to show up under automatic. So it's kind of one of those counterintuitive logic streams to me, but maybe there's something I don't know there. Under the backup and recover, I just have it show me every 20 minutes. The problem with the auto recover for mine, and I've said this in previous videos, is that if you're dealing with anything that is sensitive information, has classified, non-disclosures, this backup copies and saver is going to put information from your system buried kind of deep into the app data, That's not something I want to find 6 months after I've closed the project and I've told my customer that, hey, I've gotten rid of all your data, and come to find out I got your complete project stored in my app data as a backup. All right, so it's a consideration that you have to be aware of. So show me 20 minutes, and I will walk the tightrope of my system crashing under certain circumstances and losing a half hour or an hour or a day's worth of work, to not have to deal with going through and doing a system cleanup and go, where did this come from? Let's see, on the File Explorer, nope. Warnings, so the last thing that we did, exports, defaults. To get to the units outside of the inch, pounds, and seconds, let's stay in the drafting standard. I jumped ahead. I mentioned that probably close to 8-9 years ago, I loaded one version of SolidWorks with ISO and started using the ISO drafting standard, and stayed with it. I like the vertical, the dimensions being in that vertical orientation and not having to stack up all horizontal dimensions. It looked like a cleaner look to me. Everybody that I send drawings to doesn't like it, but they can change it over to change it back over to ANSI. So if you get one of my drawings and you don't like it, one of my parts and you don't like the dimension style, you switch back over to ANSI. And let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. I'm barely on the screen where I can OK that, so I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. So the main difference, and maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't, vertical orientation of the dimension. If I have to stack up 10 dimensions, I'm not going to be staggering my horizontals. What's the main difference there? So back into the options. I go back over to the document properties, drafting standard. I switch it back to ANSI and hit enter because my screen is not there. Now they're horizontal. And going through some of the crazy details that I've done, having all of these stacked up, and it was just harder to read. So it was not a problem for me to go to ISO on that one. So pick the one you like. I don't care what you turn in, what you use, but understand how to switch them and be able to work within that group. And then the rest of them, if you want to go around the world, there's the around the world in drafting standards. A lot of times what I'll do is I will save, as I make changes, I will save it to an external file. So when I get units and settings that I for a part or an assembly that I didn't create, I can go load my external file, drafting standard, my modded file, and bring it in and have the majority. It may not override everything, but I will get enough of it that it looks familiar to me. And then, after that, then we go from there. Shaded cosmetic threads under detailing is, we will have to go into the whole wizard to do a little bit more about that one, but in a lot of graphics cards, your shaded cosmetic threads will show up as a black cylinder. and it's kind of just a spot on your video screen or on your video that it's a cosmetic thread, but it's not able to resolve it or to find it. So most of the time I turn those off just so I don't have to deal with it. And then the units, further into the units, we were just setting for inch, pound, second, millimeters, grams, and seconds. For certain inch and fractional, I always kind of like to do this one early, is that I can go to inches, and instead of decimals, I can click in the fractionals, and what we're setting is the denominator of our fraction. And I want to go to a 32nd of an inch. If my dimension is, I'll use 9/32 as an example, and I put in 0.281. It's not close enough to 9/32 for the system to see it, as an example. At least I don't think it is. So in that case, it would still put up 0.281, and I would look at that and say, well, that's 9/32, and say, no, 0.28125 is 9/32. Round to nearest fraction. If it doesn't hit it exactly, get me close enough that I'm okay. So in constructions or large weldments, things like that, where the measuring tool is going to be the yardstick or meter stick, and not going to need fractions on a meter stick, huh? Going to be the tape measure and the then I would want to round up so that I'm in those fractions. Now, really, when you're looking at a tape measure, probably the 16th is the most that you can go to, and so we would round that to 16ths, and even that's going to be kind of a challenge. Then how do you want it to round? Halfway from 0, above 0.5, below 0.5, half to even, truncate, whatever. So you have some options. Under the custom is where you're going to be able to change your unit volume to actually get to liquid type measurements, so liters, and then pints, gallons, and imperial gallons. Let's see, probably most of the rest of these are in the we'll get to them range. So just to kind of close up with things that should be on and off in your features and sketches. Instant 2D, leave it off. Under features, instant 3D, leave it off. The orbits and the things that it selects are nuisance items to me. They're not providing you any value. All right, there's something that when you select on the face, so as an example, instant 3D is on, I'm a fully defined sketch, and I will still get this arrow and these arrows that say that I can move. And if I click one accidentally, I have just changed the model. All right. So somewhere I've told it that it can overwrite, or that I might be able to override. All right. So the other items, I don't have MBD, the manufacturing-based definition, but the education versions do. It has a few more tools than DIM Expert, but we'll look quickly at DIM Expert as the solution. So one of the questions that was asked was, do I need to put dimensions on this solid body? And the answer is still no, because I can get to your dimensions right there and right there, and I'm happy with that. If you want to do something more and start to look into the future at manufacturer-based dimension, then we'll look at the DIM Expert, and I can go with a size dimension. I have to tell it that I'm going between planes for a width feature, select it, OK it, and place it. Back in those options, there is a whole segment, DIM Expert, that goes through and it sets the tolerances for each of those items. Because my default units was 2 decimal places, it overrode my 3-place plus or minus 5. So if I go back to the units, and basically what I was looking at is I have 3.5 plus or minus 0.01, so plus or minus 10 thousandths. I need to switch from a length tolerance of 2 decimal places to 3 decimal places. And are you going to let me in or out of that somewhere, I hope? So it's already been applied, so let's see if it does it to the next one. Size dimension, go from face, pick my planes, select the other face, hit OK, place the dimension. All right, so I can delete this one, the first one, or I can highlight it and go back and override to the current. Oh, got button happy there. 3 decimal places, 3 decimal places, and it will show similar at that point. Whatever that one was, it still had 10 thousandths on it. All right, whatever. Location dimension is going to be something like the holes. So I am going from a cylinder to the plane, and I do have to watch because this is going to mid plane, and I want to select the plane that I selected. Okay, and that one's okay. And as we're going through and accumulating each of those dimensions, it's adding it to my DIM expert list. It's adding it to the MBD list. So again, from the face, so I want to go from the plane to the cylinder, and it's not an arc segment, whole segment, and then location, position. Now, once I have all of those, I've gone through all that trouble to dimension to the solid body. This is something that would stay with the model and anybody could read, and at some point may be the dimension scheme that overcomes the paper drawing. But I still don't think we're there yet. In the meantime, under the annotations then, I can show those DIM expert annotations or not. I can show all reference, all feature dimensions, which is everything. And when we turn on, let's see, is it in here? We have to turn on the names, the addresses, but we can put in everything associated with those dimensions as well. So as far as naming, you don't need to name every dimension, but if I had a critical, or when we start talking about configurations, instead of a D3 at sketch 1 address, maybe this is a height address. So I have the ability to name these based on information. So height, and will show up if I tell it to show the named items. Last one in that list was why my dimensions are purple and yours are black. There is a setting in here for, and I always have to remember where I hide it. No. It's going to be under sketches or drawings. Yeah, drawings, this looks familiar. And what I'm looking for, there we go. Mark all part assembly dimension for import into drawings by default. Which means that if I go into, so this box is checked on yours. That's the difference. I uncheck that because I want to be able to go into a sketch and say that this 2.5 dimension, 2.5 inch dimension, that I need to put a note on it that inspect to part number, dot. Okay, at that point I've assigned that note. I really don't care about the rest of these because I drew these for convenience, or I applied those dimensions for convenience. This is the important one. So when I go through and I mark that for the drawing, it switches it to black and the rest stay purple. So I go into the drawing, and if I remember at that point to import my part dimensions, and I import, this is pretty much the only one that comes in. I can tell it to bring all of them in, but this is the only important one that I really need to come in. So my logic, the way that I prefer to operate, these are irrelevant because I'm creating, and when I'm pulling this out of thin air, when I'm pulling this out of my imagination, I'm dimensioning to what's convenient to create the part. I'm looking into the future as to when I create the detail, what's going to be important to me, but when I create that working document to go to manufacturer, then I'm detailing for manufacturer, and this would be an important note for me to include, and to have. All right, the rest of these, not so much. So I can exclude them and then include just the ones that I place a higher priority on. Let's see, questions? So, tons of details, tons of little settings in the background, lots of visual clues. And at this point, you're still cycling up, you're working through those, you're making some of the decisions of what I'm showing you. Do you like it? Do you want to try it? Turn it on, turn it off, kind of going through that process. Question?
On one of the assignments, there's a table of coordinates for holes, and it's kind of in the same category as the options.
And the tables are for the drawing module. So certain tables will show up in the assembly, and well, we can check. You know, pretty much if you don't see something available, it's around somewhere. Let's see, are we going to be able to get it? Well, first of all, it depends on the table. Do we have enough information set up to generate the table? But most of the tables are going to show up in the drawing. The few that show up in the assembly are usually out of scale or more of a pain than they're worth. In most cases, they're nice to be able to insert temporarily, but I don't use them as much as I use the tables and the drawings.
For inserting those holes, we take those coordinates. Is there some way to make a hole with those coordinates instead of trying to dimension the two dimensions?
So the recommendation, I know which part you're talking about. There's either 2 or 3 of those type projects where they give you the whole location and description table. And in that case, instead of using the linear dimensions, they were in the other one. Let's go ahead and get rid of these. Instead of using the linear dimensions, this is where I'd recommend an ordinate dimension. And under the ordinate dimension, I place the first, and then I go right down the list and can do 20 holes out of this one dimension scheme, and then each one of these is individually managed. All right, and then ordinate dimension for the base and location, just to stay consistent. Well, I should have started up here for the 1 inch, but you know, whichever way you go with it. And then this cleans up the you know, instead of having a stack of 10 extension lines and dimension lines and everything, now I just have the extension lines and the location. That's about the best at this point. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop here.